Welcome viewers to the Personal Injury Law Show. My name is Don Maffia. I'll be your host tonight. Tony Carbone is taking a little bit of a break. And I'm hosting a new set. As you can see, we've got a new table, brand new set, which is all really comfortable.
It's very exciting.
Very exciting. Now, the Personal Injury Law Show, viewers, it's a show where we talk about everything to do with personal injuries, compensation, and how it affects you, the viewers. Now, tonight, I'll introduce my the panel. I've got Nunzio Tartaglia. Good evening, Nunzio.
Don, Vivian, welcome, viewers.
And we also have Vivian Ryan, a marketing director. Welcome.
Thanks, Don. Hi, viewers. Hi, Nuns.
Now, tonight we're going to be talking to Bob Herbert from TrackSAFE. Now, TrackSAFE's a harm prevention charity, which is to do with trying to reduce near collisions, injuries and fatalities on the rail network.
Don, we're privileged to have Bob on the show. Before we kick off, though, what's been in the news?
Well, like always, there's lots in the news. We've got this story here. I'll just read the title. Woman sues family of boy she killed in a car accident.
Yeah, this is a very interesting case. It actually occurred in Canada in October of 2012. This woman who was driving, actually speeding, she was found to be on a very wet and dark night at about 1 o'clock in the evening. A cyclist was actually riding home without any high visibility vest, along with his friend, and she actually collided into him and he subsequently died, and his friend was severely injured. This mother, who actually was found, well, I don't know whether she was found guilty of murder.
No, she wasn't.
But she killed the cyclist, unfortunately, and now she's actually suing the family for post-traumatic stress disorder and loss of enjoyment of life. So for $1 million Canadian. What are the chances of...
Well, she's suing the dead boy.
Effectively.
Okay.
Effectively. It's through the family. So it's more of a look, I think, a moral dilemma than anything, because, look, even if this, the deceased unfortunately wasn't wearing high visibility vests and the like, it's a moral issue. Do you really sue the parents of the dead boy?
Especially for that amount of money. And the family have been through so much trauma as it is, and even so, the younger brother subsequently had a overdose and died at the loss of his brother. So you're absolutely right, whether or not would we take it this far. But interestingly though, the dead boy's family are suing her as well. So
she's admitted speeding before the accident. And now she's suing them. Look, again, we always say always in America, or only in America, but I think this is only in Canada. Look, I think here it's definitely something that, look, for me, morally, it's just...
What are the chances of her actually suing successfully in these circumstances, though,
Well,
Don?
look, if the cyclist was at fault, or
which the court said he was at fault because he wasn't wearing a high visibility vest.
Then she sustained injuries, and if it's in Victoria, as long as you satisfy those serious injury tests that we're always going to show about, then she could have a claim.
There are prospects. Yeah. It just, as I said, it's a moral issue.
Look, we don't hear much about it because, unfortunately, unless there's insurance, people don't tend to take it that far. But in this case, it looks like, well, maybe there is some insurance, and that's why we're pursuing for $1 million Canadian.
Very interesting.
We'll move on. The next one, this is the TPG, which is a phone telco, which are fined $400,000 after what they say emergency call death. Nunzio, you want to tell us a bit about that one?
Yeah, basically, TPG have been fined $400,000 because they've cut off people's access to making our calls because they haven't paid for bills and the like, but at the same time, they also deny them access to make emergency calls, which really should be an open right, irrespective if you haven't paid your bill or not. And there's one instance where a family obviously hadn't paid their bill. The husband had a heart attack at home, couldn't make an out call, and the mobile service at the time wasn't great, and so they couldn't provide the adequate information to the paramedics, and subsequently he died, I think, a few days later. And look, it's that double-edged sword. You haven't paid your bills, but at the same time, look, emergency calls should be an open right.
But is it
shouldn't be compromised.
Well, is that a legislative directive that all phones are able to phone 000?
Look, I thought it was the case. I thought in respect of every phone you can get access to it.
I thought 000 is a free call anyway.
It is a free call. It is a free call. So what are the chances of this woman, the wife of this deceased, now being able to sue for compensation against TPG given these findings?
Look, arguably I think there could be prospects, because if you can prove that delay caused the ultimate death, then I think there are prospects of suing in litigation. And it's not one, they haven't paid the bill, but then TPG ends up getting sued.
Well, actually, they said it was the court found that it was a software glitch that had rendered these phone services inactive. So, arguably, there might be a claim for the deceased wife.
They may well. We'll keep an eye on that one. Now, moving on, we have another article here. It's called Life Ruin. This is where there's an amputee went into hospital, was found to have a blood clot, but the hospital didn't do anything for some time, and subsequently she lost her whole leg. Vivian?
Oh, it's just a tragic case. So essentially, this woman arrived at a hospital in Bendigo. She thought she was actually having a heart attack, but at the time her leg was numb. They admitted her, despite her repeated requests to the staff that her leg was numb, blue. They still didn't examine her until after 2 days, where they subsequently found a blood clot. As a consequence, and this is her argument in her statement of claim, she lost her leg because they took so long to determine the findings with the leg.
Yeah, so she's suing the Bendigo Hospital in a Supreme Court action, and look, it's good if they can prove that the delay caused the ultimate damage, then arguably there is a case there. And look, Don, it just brings into light all these horrific medical stories that they're unfortunately in the media at the moment. And
well, there's another one we're going to talk about. This is where there's all stats about how many hospital patients die in 2 years because of mistakes.
This is incredible. It's been shown that over 60 hospital patients died during the period of 2011 and 2013 whilst being in the care of the hospital. But what is most alarming is 75 patients, in addition to that, have been found to have either tools post-surgery still retained in their body. I don't understand how that can happen. There's a team of people who are operating. Does not one person identify that they've left a clamp or a pad inside?
Viv, unfortunately happens. I see it regularly, unfortunately, with clients who come into the firm and with queries, and there's some instances where they operate on the wrong person.
Yeah, well, as has happened.
They gave some examples. There's one example I just kept reading over and over again, couldn't believe it, where the nurses fed a patient, or the hospital fed a patient, with sandwiches when the patient's got a history of choking on small food.
And
guess what happened? The patient passed away.
It's incredible, and it's really, really scary. But I just wonder, what do you think is going on with our medical professionals?
Well, look, it's arguably whether it's a resource issue, whether there's so many patients that they're rushed, they're not, they don't have enough resources and staff to, I suppose, monitor the situation. That is a reason, and that bodes well in terms of like the Royal Melbourne Hospital now. Well, got 6-hour waits.
But these examples are just blatant. I mean, it doesn't matter how much, you can put as much resources as you want, but things like that.
But if you're rushed on, then sometimes stupid mistakes happen.
Well, exactly. And unfortunately, it's at the cost of some lives. So, viewers, stay tuned. We've got Bob Herbert from TrackSAFE to talk about his charity and what the plights for rail employees, and also just to reduce the number of fatalities on the rail network. So stay tuned for sponsors break. Welcome back, viewers. Before the break, we're talking about some articles in what's in the news. If you have any comments, go to our Facebook or Twitter. We look forward to reading your comments. And with me now, we have Bob Herbert. Welcome, Bob. Now, Bob, you've got an impressive CV, but you have the Order of Australia, so congratulations on that, awarded to you in 2005. But also, you're a chairman of TrackSAFE Foundation. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, TrackSAFE Foundation was started half a dozen years ago because of the very high number of people who were unfortunately taking their lives on the rail system. I was a member of a company board, Mainco, which had the operation of the Melbourne train network. And my colleagues and I were absolutely appalled by the statistics. Each month we saw of about half a dozen people who'd taken their lives. In New Zealand, there'd been a foundation established because of the death of the sister of a famous cricketer there. He started the Chris Cairns Foundation. We thought this was a pretty good thing, so we moved to establish TrackSAFE in Australia. It got a good kick-off because UGL Limited contributed a couple of $100,000 to get the ball rolling, and companies in the industry very quickly followed to establish TrackSAFE as a viable charitable organisation.
So you're endeavouring to reduce near collisions, injuries, fatalities on the rail network, resulting from suicide and other reckless behaviour, but also you're addressing suicide and trespass on now rail network, and you improve the education awareness around railway level crossing safety. Nunzio, have you seen the stats as to how many people die by suicide?
Yeah, just to give this issue a bit of context, and to be honest, when I saw the stats, it blew me away, Don. I don't think people realise how big of an issue it is in society, and I think the issue is that annually there are around 150 suicides on the rail network and a further 1,000 attempts, half resulting in serious injury. They're just some staggering numbers, and hearing obviously what TrackSAFE does, I've got to say it's a fantastic cause, and we're privileged to have Bob here on the show to push the cause, because it needs to be pushed.
Now, Bob, what sort of things does TrackSAFE do? Can you give us examples of the initiatives that put in place to prevent all these deaths by suicides or reckless behaviour?
Don, there are 4 things we're trying to achieve. One is to educate people about safety around level crossings. That's a very important thing. The second thing is to educate people how dangerous it is to trespass on the rail network. People train surfing, kids on the side of the track throwing stones at the train, those sorts of things. The third thing is, of course, to try and minimise the number of suicide attempts that occur on the rail network. But importantly, the fourth thing is to try and help the drivers and the employees in the rail industry who are impacted by the trauma of people doing these things, either attempting to harm themselves or trespassing.
If we can just break that down, Bob. So, say for instance, that last point you raised about helping the employees. What initiatives are in place to give them the support that they need?
Well, we're leading the world in this. We've brought together all of the rail operators who've got various programs of counselling and the like to try and establish best practice. We've taken professional input as well from the bodies that deal with post-trauma issues. And we've developed a framework for dealing with trauma management, and we're in the process of implementing that now across the network.
And the employees are somewhat the forgotten victims. They are first on the scene, Bob. They'll be there, they see if it's a death by suicide or from reckless behaviour or trespass. Generally, they'll be the first people there. So in my line of work, I see a lot of these people who have what's called a psychological reaction or nervous shock. So through TrackSAFE, I guess that's where the support is needed for these people. And Nunzio, one stat that you mentioned was that every railway worker in their lifetime in that job will see a death.
And I think, further extension of that, I think once, if they do witness a death or there is an accident, by way of suicide, sometimes they don't return to work, and nor do I blame them. And so I assume this support network that you guys provide continues even if they aren't, railway drivers anymore?
Indeed. You can compare, say, this with an ambulance driver in the emergency services field. They're trained to deal with this. Train drivers and station staff and those that are involved in train maintenance aren't trained to deal with these traumatic issues. So they face it as part of their employment. So the responsibility we've got and undertaken is to try and help them deal with this trauma that they've encountered. As you say, some people in their working life of 10 years might be involved in three issues. It impacts some people quite differently from others. We bring in the experts to try and help how we best counsel people, how you can support them and deal with the issues as they react to these traumatic circumstances.
And another thing we're talking, Bob, off the show, before the show, we're talking about the initiatives where you're looking at training the rail staff to identify people who are looking at, unfortunately, suicide acts. Tell us a bit about that, Bob.
Well, training is a very big aspect of our activities. We have, very pleasingly, a program that is to train school children, primary and secondary school children, about safety on the rail network. But in addition to that, we're looking at how we might be able to identify people who are intent on harming themselves by greater use of CCTV and programs which will educate staff on the stations to see, well, that person's behaving in a peculiar manner, we better step in and have some discussion or intervention with them.
So, look, in terms of, obviously a big pillar of the organisation is to reduce instances of suicide and the like, and is it something that needs a big awareness program like the TAC do with their road accidents? What's the plan, and what's TrackSAFE's objective in this regard?
Well, we'd certainly like to be able to generate some publicity about what we're doing to maintain the enthusiasm that comes from the industry. I'm delighted that we've got support from the entire industry. The companies are engaged, they provide funds to support what we're doing, but importantly too, the Rail Tram Bus Union, the RTBU, representing the employees, sits on our board, and we've got very wide acceptance from employees about what we're doing. The more support we can get, the better, and that comes from some promotion and publicity about what we're on about.
Yeah. And also, Bob was reading through, you have some guidelines to the train network as to how to report death by suicides, and the idea behind that is trying to prevent other deaths by suicide occurring as well. Now, I've noticed some things that there's also other guidelines as to what should be announced. Can you tell us how did that come about, Bob? Why there's such... I've read these guidelines and I've been trying to adhere to the guidelines, but it's really trying to prevent further suicides occurring by not detailing those type of deaths.
Well, there's been many studies about this, and it's sometimes regarded as a controversial issue, but the simple logic is that in dealing with such a sensitive issue, it's important not to have it be an encouragement to others follow suit. So there are frameworks and guidelines that we all observe to try and deal with this objectively, not in a manner which might exacerbate the problem and intensify the actions which unfortunately do occur.
Viewers, we have to go to the sponsors break, but we'll be back with Bob talking more about TrackSAFE and how they're trying to implement rail safety across the board. Welcome back, viewers. We have with us Bob Herbert from TrackSAFE, talking about TrackSAFE and its plight to reduce the number of injuries and deaths caused on the rail network. Bob, we were talking before the break about what TrackSAFE stand for, but you're involved also in a lot of advocacy work. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it's an important part of our operation to get across to the politicians and others about some of the activities that occur that we could address. I give the example of trespass on the rail. I was sitting at the MCG on the weekend. Across the screen comes a fine, an advice of a fine of $8,600 if you trespass on the MCG. We had the example of a young person on the back of a train from Perth to Adelaide taking photographs of himself, posting it on YouTube, and the fine that he encountered was less than $200. So we're just saying that's ridiculous. You've got to increase the tempo of the fines to try and prevent that sort of behaviour. But there are other activities as well. We invited the train drivers to tell us about what they believe are the 10 most dangerous level crossings in their state, which they did. And we've sent that list to each of the state governments and said, do something about it. Pleasingly, we're getting some reaction to it now. When you go for your driver's licence, there's no questions about level crossing safety. Why shouldn't there be? So part of our role is to advocate that these sorts of changes should occur to try and minimise the number of deaths on the rail system.
Yeah, look, it's fantastic that a body such as TrackSAFE is pushing it, but my issue is, Don, and you know, you can let me know your views on this, is that sometimes it's too late. Like these level crossings, they've been an issue for a long time. We've had a lot of instances of injury, obviously suicide. Well, what needs to happen for this to occur?
Well, it's a very reactive position that the government has taken. Now, if you look at, Bob used the example, you ask railway drivers, train drivers as to top 10 dangerous crossings. The reason why they know it's dangerous is because no doubt they've been involved in collision or near collisions. So it's already too late.
Government should be aware of that already.
Yeah.
Well, they should. And look, there's been plenty of examples. I mean, there's been a few accidents. There's been a couple in the Kerrang train accident which involved a truck on a level crossing and a train. And the level crossing is just atrocious. You cannot get a truck across there without risk being hit by a fast train. So, Bob, I guess on one hand, it's good that the government's sort of now reacting and they've budgeted to change a few railway crossings. But your view, Bob, is there a few more that have to go? I mean, it sounds like there's never going to be an end point to it. There's too many railway crossings.
Well, it's a big challenge. And there's a lot of technology that's been developed to try and make level crossings safer. But just keep in mind, there's something like 23,000 level crossings in Australia. So there's a cost factor that comes into here. You can't deal with a lot of them. But advances are being made. We are now starting to undertake a program of collecting statistics of near misses or really near hits, because they might only be a second away from someone being very seriously injured or killed. So we can get more ammunition to argue for safer level crossings across Australia.
What's TrackSAFE's objectives in terms of reducing, obviously, injury rates, suicide rates? What are you looking to achieve? I know it's a very difficult number to target, but what are the objectives of TrackSAFE?
Well, like all activities, when you go into them and you spend a lot of money, you've got to have some objectives. Yeah. And we've set ourselves the tall order of trying to reduce death by suicide on the rail network by 20% over 5 years. Okay. So that's what we're working to achieve.
And Bob, recently there's been some changes in Victoria to do with psychological injuries. There's an introduction that has pretty much restricted the type of psychological injuries can get entitled to sue. In your experience, Bob, the people who are involved in these accidents who see the death by suicide, it doesn't end there, does it? They have the ongoing counselling, the ongoing support that they need.
One of the very important things that we are doing is in dealing with the trauma that train drivers and other rail employees suffer as a consequence of these incidents, is how we best counsel them, develop best practice around it. We've become probably one of the leading countries in the world in dealing with these things, where we have programs to counsel employees, to support them. People react in different ways. Some are able to cope with it, others are really severely impacted. Some can't return to work, others turn to drugs and alcohol. It impacts on their marriage. So we're looking at those issues with professional advice to try and deal with that and help them through the trauma that they're suffering. We work with other professional bodies. We have MOUs, Memorandums of Understanding, with Lifeline and Beyond Blue. And without preempting what the board might decide, I hope we'll engage with the organisation running Are You OK Day.
That's a fantastic that you're partnering with so many great organisations. But before we end up, Don, though, great what TrackSAFE's doing with employees and the like, but unfortunately the new TAC change has got implemented of unfortunately compromise people's access to compensation in instances like this. Can you explain just briefly to the viewers?
Well, just briefly, we've discussed on the show before, Nunzio, if an employer has been involved in this type of accident and he sustains a mental injury, they have work cover entitlements because they're an employee, and that includes medical expenses, wages, and also a lump sum. But to access people who are severely injured, to access to compensation, they have to satisfy a test of serious injury under the Transport Accident Act, which has been restricted, and I can't even summarise it in a minute, but it really much means you need to have problems for 3 years, got to have a mental injury, has to be treated by a psychologist, psychiatrist, not a doctor, a psychologist, psychiatrist, and it's got to have effects on the social and recreation, social and relationship and work. So it's put the bar so high.
Yeah.
So I think that just counteracts what TrackSAFE is, in my opinion, is intended to do, and then you have TSN on the other side, or the government, who has restricted these claims. So it's an unfortunate situation. So Nunzio, as you know in this show, we like to advocate against those changes. Bob, is there any final messages you would like to tell our viewers?
We'll just get behind what we're about. We're very pleased with the right across the board support from the train rail operators. That's been universal, from the employees in the industry. There is a finite amount of funds we've got. We want to build on our pool of funds to continue our work, and we want to take our message across Australia into the world. And there are ways to connect with us through our website, and we'd be very pleased to get the community support behind what we're doing.
And for people who need to talk, you can always contact Beyond Blue or Lifeline. Nunzio, last words? Look,
I just want to thank Bob for coming to the show. Look, privileged to have you on and to promote the cause, because it is a great cause, and I urge all viewers to go to the website and support what's happening, because it's invaluable to the community. So thanks a lot, Bob. I appreciate it.
Viewers, stay tuned for next week. We have the CEO of Metro Train and a train driver to go through their experiences. Go to our website, go to Twitter, go to Facebook. We'll see you next week.